Part 46. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 451. At this time, after Lin Yu heard Evelyn say this, he also looked towards the town. As expected, the tentacles of the desert beast stretched out first moved the entire town. But what made Lin Yu feel even more incredible was probably this place. Why did this desert beast appear? You know, this is an epic level beast. Generally, epic level beasts are domineering in places with abundant spiritual power, but the spiritual power in this place is not abundant, and it can even be said to be extremely poor. Even if Lin Yu wanted to summon the time and space beast, he would have to consume most of the spiritual power in his dungeon, but this desert beast could actually survive here, and it seemed that it had also used its innate skills. This of course made Lin Yu quite incredible. Lin Yu half closed his eyes, and a bit of complexity flashed in his eyes. His brows seemed to be twisted together, and then he shook his head. Strange, it's so strange. This desert phantom beast shouldn't appear in this ghost place, but why did it appear now? Unbelievable, unbelievable. At this moment, the desert phantom beast seemed to sense Lin Yu's presence, so it suddenly turned its head and glared at Lin Yu fiercely, with a cold look in its eyes. At this time, Lin Yu felt the terrifying aura emanating from the desert phantom beast, and his face sank slightly, with a solemn look in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. At this moment, the desert phantom beast suddenly moved. It came to Lin Yu in just one breath, and then it waved its huge palm towards Lin Yu and slapped him directly. Lin Yu just retreated suddenly behind him. After seeing this scene, Evelyn was quite concerned. "Are you okay?" Lin Yu turned his head and looked at Evelyn, then waved his hand casually. "It's no big deal. Although this big guy is strong, he may not be able to deal with me." Lin Yu said this in a cold voice, and at this time, the sneer on the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. The desert phantom beast seemed to understand what Lin Yu said. At this moment, he heard an angry roar from the desert phantom beast's mouth, and then he saw the desert phantom beast rushing towards Lin Yu again. At this time, after seeing this scene, Lin Yu couldn't help but shook his head slightly. "Tell me, you big guy, why can't you stand being joked? It's just a joke with you. Are you so angry?" Lin Yu spread his hands and smiled. At this time, the desert beast stretched out countless silk threads from its body, and these countless silk threads suddenly wrapped around Lin Yu. Lin Yu's face froze, and then his mind moved, and a long sword suddenly appeared in his palm. At this time, Lin Yu showed a cold light on his face. "If you don't accept my toast, you will be punished. Since you insist on seeking death, it would be unreasonable if I don't fulfill your wish today." After Lin Yu finished speaking, he swung the nine-dragon sword in his hand without saying anything, and chopped directly at the desert beast. When the desert beast saw the nine-dragon sword in Lin Yu's hand, his face was also shocked, and his eyes and eyebrows were full of disbelief. At this moment, the overwhelming momentum was directly revealed on Lin Yu's body, and Lin Yu's eyes were full of gloom. At this time, Lin Yu slowly closed his eyes. The desert phantom beast only felt that the breath of the human in front of him seemed a little scary, so he could no longer remain calm at this time, so the desert phantom beast used nearly half of its tentacles and began to emit countless silk threads, wrapping up Lin Yu's body suddenly. At this time, Lin Yu suddenly opened his eyes, and a few cold lights flashed in his eyes. At this moment, the murderous intent on his body was even more awe-inspiring. At the beginning of the calamity, the heaven and earth will not be destroyed, the vastness will last forever, and all the demons will be wiped out. After Lin Yu finished speaking, the nine-dragon sword in his hand made a dragon roar, and then it suddenly flew straight ahead. The sword energy directly cut off nearly half of the tentacles on the desert phantom beast. At this time, the desert phantom beast let out a painful roar, and his body began to shake desperately. At this time, Lin Yu seized this opportunity, suddenly flashed forward, raised the nine-dragon sword in his hand above his head, and chopped it down heavily on the desert beast. Lin Yu's sword was powerful and heavy, as if he wanted to completely cut the desert beast in half. The desert phantom beast seemed to have sensed the terrifying aura of Lin Yu at this moment, and there was a sense of fear between its eyebrows. At this moment, the desert phantom beast had already begun to retreat, and Lin Yu seemed to have noticed this, but he only sneered at the corner of his mouth, and a bit of gloom flashed in his eyes. Since you are already here, if I let you leave safely, wouldn't it make me look a little incompetent? After Lin Yu finished speaking, he rushed towards the desert phantom beast again. At this time, the desert phantom beast was directly cut into two pieces by a sword. At this moment, Lin Yu just stood there, and then turned around in a chic manner, with a bit of confidence in his eyes and eyebrows. At this time, Evelyn suddenly opened his eyes and mouth wide. Lin Yu just waved his hand and smiled, "Don't envy me so much, I'm just a legend." At this time, Lin Yu seemed to hear what Evelyn said, the phantom beast is alive again." Lin Yu's face suddenly condensed. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji-Sheng Chang. Chapter 452. At this time, after Lin Yu heard what Evelyn said, he suddenly turned around and looked back. Then he saw the desert fantasy beast and waved his huge tentacles, just like that. He smashed towards Lin Yu like crazy. At this time, after Lin Yu saw this scene, the corners of his eyes and brows were filled with a look of disbelief. At this moment, his brows seemed to be knitted together. Strange, this big guy should have been killed by me just now, why did he come back to life again? However, Lin Yu had no time to think at this time, because the speed of the desert fantasy beast was a bit faster than before. At this time, Evelyn just stayed where she was. At this time, Lin Yu hurriedly rushed to Evelyn's side, picked up Evelyn, and then desperately retreated towards the back. After a long while, Evelyn seemed to have come back to her senses. "Do you think there is a possibility that we have been controlled by him now? It's just that the scene just now was simulated by him according to what we thought in our hearts." Evelyn's voice rang in Lin Yu's ears. At this time, Lin Yu heard it. After Evelyn said this, her expression suddenly condensed. At this time, something strange flashed through his eyes, and then he raised his eyebrows slightly. "Yes, what you just said is indeed true, it is indeed possible." Perhaps because he was too excited, Lin Yu kissed Evelyn so hard on the cheek. At this time, two blushes instantly appeared on Evelyn's pretty face. After running for a while, Lin Yu suddenly began to return his righteousness to his heart. At this moment, he summoned the space-time beast. After the space-time beast appeared, Lin Yu jumped directly to the space-time beast. On the head. "If I guess correctly, this should be an illusion of time and space. Is there any way you can break this illusion of time and space?" After hearing what Lin Yu said, the space-time beast thought for a moment and nodded gently. "Maybe there is a way to try it, but I'm not sure." After Lin Yu heard what the space-time beast said, his face suddenly became happy. "It doesn't matter, I believe you," Lin Yu just said softly. When the time and space beast heard Lin Yu say this, he nodded slowly, and then began to calm down, gather his energy in his dantian, and calm down in Zifu. A moment later, the space-time beast moved forward, taking a slight step forward, and then they saw a dilapidated town, and the figures they had seen before also disappeared without a trace at this time. Without a trace. After Lin Yu saw this scene, his face began to turn slightly pale. At this time, he couldn't help but shake his head slightly. "How is that possible? This is clearly not the town I just saw." After hearing what Lin Yu said, the space-time beast just smiled. "I don't know what is going on, but this is the original side of time and space that I sensed." The space-time beast said so unhurriedly. At this time, Lin Yu suddenly had an ominous premonition in his heart, and he just jumped off the head of the space-time beast. You are not a real time and space beast. I have never broken that illusion from beginning to end. It seems that you are much more difficult to deal with than I thought. When the desert fantasy beast heard what Lin Yu said, he understood that Lin Yu should have seen through him, but just now when Lin Yu tried to commit suicide, he had been taken away by the space-time beast. This place is the second level of illusion. Even if Lin Yu breaks this level of illusion, he will not be able to get out. Ha ha ha, although you are a little smarter than I thought, it is too late for you to realize this now, so you should stay here obediently and become my nourishment with peace of mind. The voice of the desert fantasy beast sounded in Lin Yu's mind. Lin Yu's eyes flashed with a bit of coldness, and the killing intent in his body at this moment was even more stern, and a cold aura began to slowly emerge from Lin Yu's body. That cold aura began to spread quietly. Ouch, I didn't expect that my nourishment would actually be angry, but your anger seems to have no effect. This second level illusion is more difficult to break than the first level illusion. You can't even break through the first level illusion, let alone this second level illusion. It's already an illusion, so you might as well enjoy your last moments here. At this time, Lin Yu glanced at his surroundings. There was endless desolation and ruin, and Evelyn had long since disappeared without a trace. Lin Yu half squinted his eyes, and then shook his head slightly. All this is just an illusion. As long as it is an illusion, there will definitely be flaws. As long as there are flaws, then I will definitely be able to use this, break through this illusion. When Lin Yu thought of this, he stopped walking down and sat down cross-legged to meditate. At this time, Lin Yu's spiritual power began to be drawn away bit by this desert fantasy beast. After the desert fantasy beast enjoyed the spiritual power of Lin Yu at the moment, the joy on its face was beyond words. I didn't expect this stupid guy to have so much spiritual power, but all of this is mine. After the desert phantom beast said this, it also laughed loudly. At this time, Su Yang's spiritual power was also being drawn away by the desert phantom beast bit by bit. As for the scene he saw before, it was just an illusion. But for some reason, Lin Yu only felt that his eyelids were getting heavier. Although he didn't experience anything, he felt that his mental strength was getting worse and worse. At this time, he felt that his eyelids were very heavy, and he also wanted to rest. Lin Yu just shook his head. No, I absolutely can't fall asleep. If I fall asleep, I'm afraid I will never wake up again. But the more Lin Yu wanted to resist the sleepiness, the more he couldn't resist it. And at this moment, in the depths of his mind, a huge bell suddenly began to ring. When he heard the bell, he suddenly felt that his consciousness was clear for a while. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 453. The original desert fantasy beast was immersed in the joy of enjoying the spiritual power of Lin Yu. At this time, he completely ignored his fantasy. What happened now? After all, the current desert fantasy beast thought he had everything in mind. In another half hour, I will be able to absorb all the spiritual power in his body. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect that. Although this little guy is not old, he contains a lot of spiritual power. This is true. It's really something I didn't expect. The excitement in the eyes of this desert fantasy beast began to become more and more obvious. After waiting for this moment, Lin Yu suddenly opened his eyes, and a cold and murderous intention enveloped the desert fantasy beast. The desert fantasy beast woke up suddenly. When he opened his eyes, he saw Lin Yu had appeared in front of him. At this time, the desert fantasy beast was also full of shock. How is that possible? Lin Yu's expression was gloomy, as if he was about to drip water. Nothing is impossible, today is the day you die. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he brought up the 9-dragon sword without saying a word, and cut off all the tentacles of the desert fantasy beast with one strike. You must know that the tentacles were cut off and killed in the illusion before, so there was no real harm to the desert fantasy beast at all, but this sword is different. All the desert fantasy beasts have the tentacles were cut off numerous times. At this time, a painful wail was heard from the desert fantasy beast's mouth. Lin Yu suddenly rushed towards the desert fantasy beast again. The desert fantasy beast seemed to understand the terror of the man in front of him. However, the desert fantasy beast was still unwilling to give up at this moment. He stretched out his tentacles again, trying to control Lin Yu. But this time, Lin Yu was obviously on guard. His figure was like a ghost, and those tentacles couldn't touch him at all. Moreover, his 9-dragon sword chi body protection, when those tentacles came close to him, will be completely shattered by this 9-dragon sword in an instant. In just one breath, Lin Yu had already arrived in front of the desert fantasy beast. His eyes were filled with a cold light, and the killing intent on his body was even more awe-inspiring. "Do you have anything else to say now?" There was no emotion in Lin Yu's words. At this time, the desert fantasy beast finally began to be afraid. "Please, please, please let me go. I am willing to recognize you as my master. I am willing to accept you as my master." At this time, Lin Yu just shook his head. "No need, you are too ugly." The desert fantasy beast heard Lin Yu, and after saying this, he almost spit out a mouthful of old blood. "Stop talking nonsense. Since you have nothing to say, I can only send you to hell now. Remember to stay away from me when you see me in the next life." After Lin Yu finished speaking, he raised the 9-dragon sword towards the front and struck it suddenly, and then the whole body of the desert fantasy beast was split into two in an instant. The desert fantasy beast fell straight to the ground. This time, the desert fantasy beast was really dead. Evelyn and Su Yang only felt the scene around them change instantly. When the desert fantasy beast died, they both regained consciousness directly. At this moment, after they regained consciousness, Lin Yu was about to stand up and move forward, but he heard the sound of a fight in the distance. At this time, his expression suddenly condensed. A bit of solemnity flashed in his eyes. At this time, Su Yang gradually woke up. At this time, Su Yang looked at the private person, a bit of solemnity flashed in his eyes, and then he felt something. A very familiar smell. When Su Yang felt this familiar aura, his expression became slightly different, and there was an unbelievable look in the corners of his eyes and brows. How is it possible? How could it be like this? At this moment, Su Yang saw Lin Yu and Evelyn. When Su Yang saw them, the two of them were also seriously ill and sought medical treatment, so they ran directly towards Lin Yu. At this time, Su Yang just fell to his knees on the ground, and then his eyes were fixed on Lin Yu. "Sir, I beg you to save my sister's life. No matter what request you have, as long as you think about the small things first, even if it means being a cow or a horse, I am willing to ride the horse for you." And at this moment, when Lin Yu heard what Su Yang said, he half squinted his eyes. There were some complicated colors in his eyes, and then he started to raise his eyebrows slightly. He raised his eyebrows. "Just your sister's life?" Su Yang nodded solemnly. "Yes, sir, please save my sister's life." Lin Yu also sighed quietly. "It's not that I don't want to save your sister, but this matter may be a little difficult, alas." Of course, Lin Yu could feel that there was a corpse general in front of him who was not too weak. Although he could easily deal with this corpse general, at this time, most of the spiritual energy in his body had been consumed. Lin Yu's expression also condensed slightly, and his brows were full of helplessness. "Well, if we really go to save people this time, I'm afraid the spiritual power in my body will not be able to support it. If it is true, then I'm afraid it will be real trouble." When Lin Yu thought of this, his face showed a tangled look at this moment. And Su Yang just knelt on the ground. Far away, an old man was fighting with 3 white corpses. The 3 idiots saw the old man killing all the countless black corpses that had appeared in the village, and they were very angry in their hearts. So they also let out a roar, and then they shot straight into the sky. Damn you, you dared to kill so many of us. If the 3 of us don't kill you today, I will feel uneasy. At this time, Lin Yu looked quite pitiful when he saw Su Yang kneeling on the ground, so after hesitating for a moment, he nodded lightly. No matter how pitiful you are, I will help you this time, but I am not sure whether it will succeed, so don't put too much hope in it. This is nothing more than Lin Yu's self-effacing words. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji-Sheng Chang. Chapter 454. If Lin Yu really took action, there would be no reason why he couldn't succeed. The 3 white corpses saw that Lin He chopped off his disciples one by one like cutting watermelons, and they couldn't sit still. We can't let this old man do this anymore, let's go together. The 3 white corpses instantly flew into the air, and the 3 of them surrounded Lin He in a pin shape. Lin He dealt with the black corpse that jumped towards him with one hand. A sticky liquid on the black corpse splashed on his face, blocking his vision. The 3 white corpses were so fast that they came in front of Lin He in an instant. The 3 of them pushed out a palm towards Lin He at the same time. Lin He's vision was blocked, and he didn't react in time, and was hit by the 3 white corpses at the same time. At this time, he fell straight to the ground, and it seemed that he was not going to survive. At this time, a woman in red suddenly rushed up, and she posted 3 spells towards the 3 white corpses one after another, and the 3 spells fell on the heads of the 3 white corpses in an instant. At this time, the woman in red uttered a word lightly, explode. The 3 white corpses exploded instantly, and Lin He's body fell to the ground, but he was dying, and it seemed that he was already dead. The woman in red shook her head, alas, I will save you today. At this moment, Lin He was lying on the ground and saw a majestic zombie wearing armor, slowly walking towards the woman in red. Lin He stretched out his hand and pointed tremblingly behind the woman in red. The woman in red didn't seem to realize the danger yet. The corpse came behind the woman in red, holding the giant axe in both hands, and then immediately chopped down heavily at the back of the woman in red. Seeing that the huge axe was about to fall on the woman in red, a man in white directly blocked the slender waist of the woman in red and moved aside. At this time, the woman in red looked at Lin Yu's profile and felt that the man was handsome, with red lips and white teeth, and looked like a handsome young man. At this time, Lin Yu felt that the place where he started was smooth, but before he could enjoy it, the corpse general rushed towards them again. Lin Yu pulled out the sword from the woman's waist, borrow the sword. He placed the woman in red in a safe place, and then rushed directly towards the corpse general. Lin Yu's footwork was very mysterious. It seemed that he just took a step forward lightly, but he had already arrived in front of the corpse general. Lin Yu raised his sword to block the giant axe of the corpse general, then turned around and kicked the corpse general in the lower abdomen. The corpse general retreated a few steps and barely stabilized his body. The corpse general roared, "Ah, I will kill you." Lin Yu just shook his head, alas, why? Why do you have to humiliate yourself? The corpse general was furious, as if no human had ever dared to be so arrogant in front of him. He suddenly chopped towards Lin Yu frantically. Although the move was not exquisite, his strength was also terrible. The red-clothed woman on the side saw the fight between the two and felt that the strength of this boy of the same age as herself was much higher. After fighting for a while, Lin Yu just shook his head. Forget it, I'm too lazy to play with you anymore. At this time, Lin Yu just threw the long sword in his hand towards the corpse general. After the corpse general took the giant axe to deflect the long sword, but when he came to his senses again, he found that Lin Yu had disappeared in front of him. At this time, Lin Yu's fingers were slightly bent into the shape of a dragon claw, and he grabbed the back of the corpse general suddenly, and then there was a sound of skin and flesh being torn apart. Then a blood-red heart as crystal clear as a ruby appeared in Lin Yu's palm. Lin Yu weighed the heart in his hand, and his face was quite satisfied. Yes, this corpse general's heart should be worth some silver. The red-clothed woman stared at the corpse general's heart in Lin Yu's hand, and her eyes were full of surprise. At this time, Lin Yu came to the red-clothed woman, and only then did he have time to carefully look at the red-clothed woman. A pair of willow leaf eyebrows, a pair of phoenix eyes, autumn water cold waves, eyes wave, those eyes seem to tell all kinds of style, slender waist cannot be grasped, graceful posture, every move is natural, every frown and smile is soul-stirring. At this time, Lin Yu couldn't help but be slightly stunned. The red-clothed woman saw Lin Yu's eyes and stared at her. If it was an ordinary person, I'm afraid Suwanur would have raised her sword and chopped her up. But for some reason, this time the red-clothed woman just shyly turned her head aside, but didn't say anything more. At this time, Lin Yu seemed to realize his own loss of composure, so he smiled, "Sorry, girl, I just lost my composure. This corpse general's heart will be given to you." After Lin Yu finished speaking, he directly handed the corpse general's heart to the red-clothed woman's hand. At this time, the red-clothed woman hurriedly waved her hand, "No, such a valuable gift, Wanner can't afford it." Lin Yu grabbed the hand of the woman in red and placed the corpse heart in her palm. "I told you to take it, so take it." After Lin Yu finished speaking, he turned around and left, without even asking Suwanur's name, and walked into the small village. Suwanur looked at Lin Yu's back, and felt like a little deer was beating wildly in her heart. At this time, Suwanur looked at the direction where Lin Yu left, which was exactly the direction she wanted to go. At this time, she was suddenly happy in her heart, and then she chased after him. Lin Yu watched Suwanur catch up with him, and he also stopped and turned to look at Suwanur. "Are you also going to the village ahead?" Suwanur nodded slightly, "Yes, this time the master sent me down the mountain to find out what the situation in the village is like." Lin Yu shook his head repeatedly. "Your master is really not very reliable in sending you to find out the situation in this village. There is at least one corpse king and 2 corpse generals in this village. With your strength alone, if you rashly enter the village, I'm afraid you will only fall into the tiger's mouth. So now you'd better leave quickly." Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 455. Amelia Su smiled, "Yes, but now that I have a husband, then." Lin Yu just smiled, "So you are trying to trick me, but meeting each other is fate, so it's good to go together." At this moment, Su Yang and Evelyn caught up with them. They saw Su Wainer and Lin Yu chatting happily. For Su Yang, being able to get to know such a strong person would be a great success. Nature is a wonderful thing, but for Evelyn, it is not like this. For some reason, when Evelyn saw Lin Yu and Su Wainer so close at this time, she felt a little sad in her heart, and a hint of helplessness flashed between her eyebrows. At this time, Evelyn coughed lightly from behind Lin Yu, "Ahem." After Lin Yu heard the voice, he turned his head and glanced at Evelyn. A few complex colors flashed in his eyes, and then he smiled like this. "You caught up so quickly, you're not too slow." At this time, after Evelyn heard what Lin Yu said, she rolled her eyes at Lin Yu angrily, and then said leisurely, "Yeah, the two of us are catching up it so fast, it's disturbing the time you two spend alone together." At this time, after Lin Yu heard what Evelyn said, he was also slightly stunned, and then turned his head and glanced in Evelyn's direction. "What are you talking about? Why can't I understand something?" Evelyn just snorted coldly and walked straight forward. Lin Yu, who was behind Evelyn at this time, was just like the 2-foot-tall monk, confused and couldn't figure out why Evelyn was like this. Lin Yu just spread his hands helplessly, with a look of confusion on his face. At this moment, Su Yang was just secretly envious. After Suwaner saw Su Yang, she turned her head and glanced in his direction, with complex colors flashing in her eyes. I said, "Why did you catch up with me?" Su Yang heard this, and after Suwaner said this, he turned his head and glanced at Suwaner. "Why can't I catch up?" At this time, 3 black lines appeared on Amelia Sue's forehead. "I can't tell you that your 3-legged cat skills are just causing trouble for yourself. Besides, the alien beast in your body is still in unstable condition. He can't provide you with any strength and power. Skills, so now you can only rely on yourself." After Su Yang heard what Suwaner said, he also smiled like this, "Staying on the mountain every day is almost suffocating me to death. I went down the mountain this time to find a way to make a breakthrough. Besides, I have been staying on the mountain and want to make a breakthrough. Which is basically an impossible thing." Su Yang's eyes were fixed directly on Suwaner, and there was quite a bit of solemnity in the corners of his eyes and brows. At this time, when Suwaner heard what Su Yang said, she was also slightly stunned, and then nodded lightly. "Well, it seems that you have made up your mind. If that's the case, I can't say anything more. I can only wish you good luck." After Su Yang heard what Suwaner said, he hugged Suwaner like this, "I knew that my sister is the best." And at this moment, Su Yang saw Evelyn and Lin Yu walking in front. At this time, Su Yang's little eyes were wandering like this, not knowing what he was thinking. Seeing Su Yang's appearance, Suwaner felt that this boy must have no good intentions. "What on earth are you thinking about? Don't think so wildly. Do you know that people like him are beyond our reach?" Suwaner just glanced towards Su Yang. At this time, Suwaner's eyes were obviously a little sad, and the bitter smile at the corner of her mouth became more and more obvious. At this time, after Su Yang heard what Suwaner said, he just waved his hand. "Who said that? My sister is so beautiful, whoever she falls in love with is lucky, so why should my sister be like this?" Rhetoric. After Suwaner heard what Su Yang said, she rolled her eyes at Su Yang angrily. "I said the kid next to you may not be able to learn it, but your kid has used this ability to flatter others. A perfect person." At this time, after Su Yang heard what Suwaner said, he also laughed. "That's all what my sister taught me. That's what my sister taught me well." Suwaner glared fiercely at Su Yang. "Who taught you this?" At this time, Su Yang also knew that although he originally wanted to flatter him, this time he was afraid that he would slap him on the horse's hooves. At this moment, Su Yang just smiled like this. "Hey, don't be angry, sister, what do you think of Mr. Lin?" At this time, after Suwaner heard what Su Yang said, her pretty face turned slightly red, and then her eyes were filled with admiration. The god of wind is handsome, and at such a young age, he has achieved such a level of cultivation, is broad-minded, and is a chivalrous and righteous man. He should be the first-class hero in the world. Suwaner said this quietly at this time. At this time, Su Yang understood what Suwaner meant just by listening. His eyes were fixed on Suwaner, and a bit of teasing flashed between his eyebrows. "Hee, how about I think of a way to match you and Mr. Lin?" Suwaner heard it, and Su Yang was moved at first, but then she heard Su Yang's laughter, and knew that this boy was deliberately teasing her, so she raised her fist directly. After a while, Suwaner grabbed Su Yang's ear directly, and then said viciously, "If you dare to tease me again, believe it or not, I will peel your skin." At this time, Su Yang naturally waved his hand and shook his head. "I dare not, I dare not, I dare not, sister." At this time, Suwaner snorted coldly after hearing what Su Yang said. "Huh, this is more like it." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 456. A few of them were talking, laughing, fighting, and making trouble, and then they walked to a small village. In front of this small village, there were children playing, an old man lying on a rocking chair, seemingly basking in the sun, and a vendor at the entrance of the village, carrying a load, seemingly selling things. If this scene was during the day, it would be nothing at all, but it happened that the scene happened at night. After Lin Yu and the others saw this scene, they also stopped in their tracks at this time. Lin Yu half squinted his eyes, with a bit of solemnity flashing in his eyes, and his brows seemed to be furrowed, as if together. It's weird, it's just too weird. Why does the scene seem so out of place? It's weird, it's so weird. Lin Yu just muttered to himself. At this moment, Su Weiner walked up to Lin Yu, and then said in a deep voice, "These people are all dead, but their souls were forcibly left here, and they still retain the memories of their lives, day after day, year after year." At this time, after hearing what Su Weiner said, Lin Yu's face sank slightly, a strange light flashed in his eyes, and his brows seemed to be knitted together. It's strange. It's really strange. How could these people's memories become like this? Do you know? Lin Yu turned around and glanced in Su Weiner's direction, his expression also slightly condensed. At this time, Su Weiner also had a bitter smile on her lips, and then she spread her hands helplessly. "I don't know why their memories have been preserved until now, but I think there is a reason for all this. Yes, it's just that the specific reason is hard to guess." A few of them walked forward at the same time, and at this time Evelyn came to Lin Yu's side, turned her head and glanced at Lin Yu. A strange look flashed in her eyes. "Color. I don't know why these guys are like this, but they seem a little strange." After Lin Yu heard what Evelyn said, he turned his head and glanced in Evelyn's direction, and his expression suddenly sank. "What's wrong? What's wrong with them?" Evelyn heard Lin Yu, and after saying this, she just smiled at Lin Yu, and then said unhurriedly, "There is something strange everywhere. Look at the actions of these people. Forget about being stiff, even if it is considered abnormal, what they are doing seems a bit weird, isn't it?" At this time, when Lin Yu heard what Evelyn said, he half squinted his eyes, a few complicated colors flashed in his eyes, and then he frowned slightly. "What you said is quite true. When you said that, I really noticed it." Evelyn just smiled like this. "It's good that you can notice these. What should we do next?" Lin Yu half squinted his eyes. "It's very simple. I have a way, but I don't know if it's feasible or not." After hearing what Lin Yu said, Evelyn's eyes flashed with a bit of confusion. "What can you do?" The two brothers and sisters seem to know some Taoist skills. As long as they use the Taoist skills properly, when the time comes, the sword can break through all kinds of magic and span the sky. This will naturally not be a difficult task. After Su Weiner heard what Lin Yu said, she also had a look of embarrassment on her face, and a wry smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. "We, brother and sister, do know some magic, but it's really hard to predict whether we can break this current situation." At this time, after Lin Yu heard what Su Weiner said, he just waved his hands gently and smiled, with a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. It doesn't matter, everything is up to you, everything is up to you, follow your heart, do whatever you want." At this time, after Su Weiner heard what Lin Yu said, a special color appeared in her eyes, and then she raised her eyebrows slightly. "I don't understand what you are saying anymore." After Lin Yu heard what Su Weiner said, he couldn't help laughing. There was a bit of joking in his eyes, and then he turned his head and glanced at Su Weiner. "Actually, this Tao method pays attention to the heart. If I guessed correctly, you actually know Tao method, but you can't use it at the critical moment, and Tao method generally emphasizes raising an original Tao beast in your body. If I guessed not, that's right, the origins of the two of you were only obtained when you were young, and you haven't grown up for a long time. Lin Yu spoke unhurriedly like this. At this time, Su Yang and Su Weiner heard Lin Yu. After saying this, a bit of surprise flashed in their eyes, and their eyes were fixed on Lin Yu. There was a look of complete disbelief in the corners of his eyes and brows. How is that possible? How did you know about it? It's simply too strange. At this time, after Lin Yu heard what they said, he couldn't help but wave his hands casually. Now is a test for you. If you face this test, you will become a butterfly. If you succeed, if it fails, it may be impossible to recover. Lin Yu spoke unhurriedly, with a special color flashing in his eyes, and a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. When the two brothers and sisters heard what Lin Yu said, a bit of solemnity flashed in their eyes. At this time, the corners of their eyes and brows were full of confusion. Mr. Kitchen, sir, we don't understand what you are saying. After Lin Yu heard what the two of them said, he suddenly smiled, and then he stood up and walked away. Whether you understand or not is entirely up to you to experience and understand. I can't help you much. Even if I can help you sometimes, I may be harming you. So seek your heart and not others. This is the difference between heaven and earth. Tao, the beginning of all things. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he disappeared directly in front of the two of them. At this time, the two of them looked at each other in such confusion. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 457. After Su Weiner and Su Yang saw this scene, they were just like the 2-foot-tall monk. They were confused and had no idea why Lin Yu said this. However, after hesitating for a moment, they seemed to be as if he remembered something. Sister, you also know that our master once taught an extremely profound theory, that is, the theory of seeking the heart. I wonder if you still remember it? At this time, after hearing what Su Yang said, Su Weiner also raised her eyebrows slightly, and then nodded gently. Of course, remember, seek your heart in everything, not others, seek your heart in everything, and you can understand all things. Su Weiner was mumbling to herself, and at this time, Su Yang's eyes were fixed on Su Weiner, and there was a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. Now sister, have you remembered something? Su Weiner nodded slightly, and then the two of them thought, and then a strange beast with golden light all over its body suddenly appeared in front of everyone. This strange beast, tiger and wind, gives people a mysterious and mystical feeling, which makes people feel a bit of admiration. That feeling is very mysterious. Even these two Dao beasts are just standing there. All give people a feeling of awe. At this moment, Su Weiner had a faint smile on her lips, and a trace of amusement flashed in her eyes. It's interesting, but it's really interesting. Yin and Yang divide heaven and earth, Tao and Dharma divide Yin and Yang. General knowledge leads to attainment, and understanding leads to enlightenment. And at this moment, after Su Weiner said this, Su Yang seemed to have remembered something, and there was a clear look in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. My Tao beast can also be summoned. Su Yang's mind moved, and then a mysterious tiger appeared directly in front of everyone. At this time, Lin Yu, who was on the side, saw the scene and nodded with satisfaction. The smile on the corner of his mouth began to become more and more obvious. Not bad, it's really good. This looks like the same thing. At this moment, Su Yang and Su Weiner walked directly in front of Lin Yu, and then they fell to the ground with one knee. Thank you for your advice, sir. If it hadn't been for your advice just now, the two of us would not have understood so quickly. Thank you, sir. At this time, after Lin Yu saw the two of them like this, he just scratched his head and smiled. Actually, I was just talking nonsense. I didn't expect that you two have such good understanding. In this case, it's the best, remember to keep it. After hearing what Lin Yu said, the two of them nodded slightly and smiled. After waiting for this moment, Lin Yu seemed to suddenly remember something. His expression sank slightly, and then he raised his head and glanced at the village in front. This Onal village has now probably become a gathering place for these demons. There are at least 2 corpse generals and a corpse king inside, so if you two want to go in, you'd better be careful. When Su Yang and Su Weiner heard Lin Yu say this, a look of determination flashed in their eyes. If it hadn't been for the teacher's teachings just now, I'm afraid that no matter how the two of us entered it, it would have been dead or alive. Now after hearing the teacher's teachings, the two of us, brother and sister, are fully confident that we can come out of it safe and sound. Lin Yu heard this. After the two of them finished speaking, a faint smile appeared on the corners of their mouths, and a hint of satisfaction flashed in their eyes, and then they spoke so gently. Nodded. Very good, then I will wait here for good news. Su Yang and Su Weiner just looked at each other, and then nodded heavily. I will definitely live up to your expectations, sir. After the two people finished speaking, they rushed straight up. The two of them were extremely fast. In just a blink of an eye, they had already disappeared in front of Lin Yu. Lin Yu's eyes stared straight at their backs, a hint of solemnity flashed in the corners of his eyes and brows, and then he sighed quietly. Evelyn came to Lin Yu's side. She turned her head and glanced at Lin Yu, with a bit of confusion in her eyes. Can the two of them really do it? I always feel that the strength of the two of them is probably. When Evelyn said this, she immediately paused. At this time, after hearing what Evelyn said, Lin Yu's eyes evoked a bit of special color, and the corner of his mouth also evoked a bit of a faint smile, and then he just so lightly he waved his hand gently. It doesn't matter, I know the strength of the two of them. Although they may not be the opponents of the Corpse King, these two corpse generals should not be able to do anything to them. Besides, as long as the two of them are in danger, I will take action. Lin Yu spoke unhurriedly like this, with the posture of controlling the overall situation, displayed without reservation. At this time, Evelyn saw Lin Yu like this, and she felt as if there was something in her heart. It looked like a little deer thrashing around, and its eyes seemed to be filled with little stars. At this time, Lin Yu was naturally unaware of all of this. He was just thinking about what the next step should be. At this time, Lin Yu could only see his eyes half squinted. After waiting for a while, a figure flashed out. The figure seemed to have been lying in wait for a long time. Without saying a word, he flew directly towards Lin Yu and swooped towards him. A slight sneer appeared at the corners of Lin Yu's lips, and there was a sense of ridicule in the corners of his eyes and brows. I didn't expect that the Corpse King could not sit still so quickly, and actually wanted to attack me. Since he wants to die, don't blame me for being rude to him. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he suddenly jumped up. At this time, he was standing tall in the void. His speed was extremely fast. In just a moment, he was already arrived in front of one person. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 458. Lin Yu didn't see this guy's appearance clearly until he came to him. When he saw this guy's appearance, he only felt sick for a while. At this time, Lin Yu felt a little sick even if he wanted to kill this guy. It turned out that this man's eye sockets were protruding, his tongue was nearly half a foot long, and the facial features almost seemed to have been forcibly brought together. His body was covered with all kinds of maggots. How disgusting it was to look like that. At this time, Evelyn seemed to have seen the appearance of that guy, who actually fell to the ground and retched. At this time, Lin Yu circulated his spiritual power in his palms, and then suddenly directed his palm towards the guy, blasting out a palm from the air. It's as far as possible for me to die, it's just too disgusting. At this moment, the guy seemed to have noticed the terrifying aspect of Lin Yu. His eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and his brows seemed to be knitted together. "GGG, little guy, I didn't expect you to be so weak. In this case, I'm afraid you won't be able to escape this death today. 3 black lines appeared on Lin Yu's forehead, and he was speechless for a while. If you hadn't been so ugly just now, which made me unable to concentrate on attacking you, otherwise why do you think you can continue to stand there? Here I am talking so arrogantly. Lin Yu said coldly. After hearing what Lin Yu said, that guy's face became bright and suddenly became ugly. You actually dare to look down on my appearance. I am just as good looking as Panan. How can you look down on me like this? I look at you, you are so tired. After Lin Yu heard what the corpse general said, he almost spit out a mouthful of old blood. No, I am indeed a little curious. Who gave you the courage to speak like this? Is it Liang Jingru? Lin Yu said in a cold voice, with a rather gloomy look between his eyebrows, and the sneer at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. As for the corpse general, after hearing what Lin Yu said, he suddenly flicked out his tongue and attacked towards Lin Yu. This attack from the corpse general was probably comparable to an epic beast, and Lin Yu had to admit that the corpse king among them might have some difficulty even himself dealing with it. But at this moment, Lin Yu's eyes flashed with a hint of determination, his expression condensed slightly, and a hint of coldness flashed across the corners of his eyes and brows. Interesting, it's really interesting. Since you are so ignorant and want to seek death, then if I don't help you today, I'm afraid it will be a bit unjustifiable. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he suddenly flew up. His speed was extremely strange. In just one breath, he was already in front of that guy. Immediately afterwards, Lin Yu swung his arm and hit that person hard. The man crossed his hands in front of him to protect him, but even so, the man still retreated back for a long time before he managed to stabilize his body. At this moment, the corpse general saw him, and he might not be Lin Yu's opponent, so at this moment, his eyes were fixed on Lin Yu's body, and a bit of gloom flashed across his face. Boy, you are indeed quite capable, and it is indeed worthy of me to summon the evil king of 10,000 corpses. After the man finished speaking, he let out an angry roar, and then the surrounding land suddenly began to tremble violently. Almost at this moment, a gap opened in the surrounding ground. At this moment, Evelyn was unsteady and almost fell into the gap. However, Lin Yu had quick eyes and quick hands and dodged forward to reach Eve. Next to Lin, Evelyn was picked up from the waist and rushed straight into the distance. After the corpse general saw this scene, he half squinted his eyes, with a faint smile on the corners of his mouth, and a hint of ridicule in his eyes. I didn't expect that little guy like you really likes heroes to save beauties. Lin Yu stood firm like this, and then glanced coldly towards the corpse general, with a slight sneer at the corner of his mouth, and a cold light flashed in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. Since you don't want to live so much, it would be really unreasonable if I didn't help you, dear, just accept death. Lin Yu suddenly rushed towards the corpse general. At this time, his speed was extremely fast. In just a moment, he had already arrived in front of the corpse general, and then he just straightened his arms and hit the corpse general hard. The corpse general didn't react in time, and was thrown away by Lin Yu. In the end, he fell heavily to the ground, and he didn't know whether he was alive or dead. At this time, Lin Yu thought he had solved the incident, and his face was full of joy at that time, but then he saw Evelyn, her eyes widened and her mouth opened wide, with a look of complete panic between her brows. Meaning. After seeing this scene, Lin Yu's face suddenly darkened, and he suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart, and then he suddenly jumped to his right. As expected, a monster composed of nearly 10,000 skulls stood behind Lin Yu, with its eyes fixed on Lin Yu. At this moment, the monster was full of murderous intent. Little guy, you don't have any other skills, but you are good at running away. But you can escape on the first day, but how can you escape on the 15th? After Lin Yu heard what the monster said, he turned around slowly and glanced at the monster. When he saw the monster's true body, he suddenly laughed for no reason. Are you assembled? After hearing what Lin Yu said, the evil king of 10,000 corpses was furious and roared angrily, "Ah, boy, I will kill you, I will kill you." At this time, Lin Yu quickly dodged and jumped to the side. "If you want to kill me, you have to have the ability to do it. Just relying on you, a guy who was completely assembled by others, is not enough." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 459. After hearing what Lin Yu said, the evil king of 10,000 corpses was filled with rage, and then he frantically struck at Lin Yu one after another. Wherever his fist touched, there was no life left. Those flowers, plants, and trees will wither in an instant. The body of the evil king of 10,000 corpses carried endless death energy. After Lin Yu saw this scene, his expression could not help but condense slightly, and there was a certain solemnity in the corners of his eyes and brows. Although this big guy looks a bit ugly, I didn't expect that this big guy's strength is actually so terrifying. It gives me a headache. It's really a headache. Lin Yu said in a cold voice, and then he started hiding while talking. His speed was not slow, and even someone as powerful as the evil king of 10,000 corpses could not do anything to him. After waiting for a while, the evil king of 10,000 corpses slammed his fist on Lin Yu's body. Lin Yu's face began to look slightly ugly, and then he suddenly jumped to the side. But even so, Lin Yu was still a step too slow. The evil king of 10,000 corpses grabbed Lin Yu with just one slap. The evil king of 10,000 corpses was nearly 80 feet tall. He held Lin Yu in his hand as if he was drilling. Like a toy. At this time, Lin Yu felt that his body was completely unable to move at this moment. He was struggling desperately, but no matter how hard he struggled, he could not shake the evil king of 10,000 corpses. At this time, the evil king of 10,000 corpses exerted force on his palm suddenly, and the corners of his eyes and brows showed a completely gloomy look. "Little guy, let me see how you can escape from my hands now." After the evil king of 10,000 corpses said this, he also burst into laughter. At this time, he seemed to be completely crazy. Even Lin Yu had to admit that under the current situation, the evil king of 10,000 corpses was indeed a bit troublesome. But just after this moment, a sneer appeared on the corner of Lin Yu's lips, who said, "I can't help you." Lin Yu suddenly summoned the space-time beast in front of him. At this time, before the evil king of 10,000 corpses could react, the space-time beast led Lin Yu out of trouble. The evil king of 10,000 corpses looked at himself, and finally caught this little guy like a loach, but almost in the blink of an eye, the little guy actually escaped from his grasp. At this time, the evil king of 10,000 corpses was completely the man was also furious, and he let out an angry roar. "Boy, I want you to die. I want to crush every bone in your body with my own hands." Lin Yu stood tall in the void, his eyes staring straight at the evil king of 10,000 corpses, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Oh, if you say that, it really scares me. I'm really scared. However, I don't think you have the ability to really kill me." After Lin Yu finished speaking, he glanced coldly at Monsi Shoes provocatively, and the sneer at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. At this time, after seeing Lin Yu like this, the evil king of 10,000 corpses let out an angry roar, and then suddenly rushed towards Lin Yu. His speed was extremely fast. In just a moment, he was already in front of Lin Yu. At this time, the evil king of 10,000 corpses swung his fist, which was nearly a foot long and wide, and hit Lin Yu hard. However, Lin Yu could not dodge at this time, and the evil king of 10,000 corpses could not dodge. The smile on the corner of Wang's mouth became more and more obvious. "Ha ha ha, little guy, you must have been scared to death, then you should just die obediently." But when his fist was about to hit Lin Yu, the evil king of 10,000 corpses only felt a burst of pain in his arm. It was as if an invisible barrier suddenly appeared in front of Lin Yu, and the evil king's face gradually became ugly. How is this possible? How is this possible? How can a boy like you be so strong? This is absolutely impossible, this is absolutely impossible. At this moment, the evil king of 10,000 corpses was even a bit hysterical, and at this time, Lin Yu was staring at the evil king of 10,000 corpses with a smile on his face, and the sneer at the corner of his mouth became even more, it became more and more obvious. Nothing is impossible. I'm not telling you, you are such a big guy after all, how come your strength is so weak? It's simply too embarrassing. At this moment, the evil king of 10,000 corpses was also furious. Boy, I didn't expect you to be quite capable, but so what? If I want to kill you, you won't be able to survive. After the evil king of 10,000 corpses finished speaking, he soared directly into the sky. At this time, he was standing in the void, looking down at the world, proud of all things in the world, and the gloomy and cold aura on his body was even more, just like that, it's revealed. At this time, Lin Yu seemed to feel the cold aura of the evil king of 10,000 corpses. He half squinted his eyes and stared directly at the evil king of 10,000 corpses. There was even a hint of a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Interesting, now that I think about it, I want to use the killer move, right? At this time, Evelyn, who was on the side, saw the fight between the two people, and it was only at this moment that she began to realize how insignificant she was. Evelyn's beautiful eyes were full of desire for power, and her eyes were staring directly at Lin Yu, with a kind of envy between her brows. When can I have such power? If one day I can really have such power, then I will have no regrets if I die. Evelyn's eyes stared directly at Lin Yu. At this time, behind the evil king of 10,000 corpses, a mass of pitch-black spiritual power surged out. The mass of pitch-black spiritual power intertwined and then circled. In just a blink of an eye, the dark mass reached up to the sky with its fierceness. Finally, a huge skull suddenly appeared in the void. The skull opened its bloody mouth, and there was a flow of blood in the bloody mouth. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 460. At this time, Lin Yu seemed to feel the blood in the skull's mouth. At this time, he could only vaguely smell a fishy and unpleasant smell. Lin Yu's brows seemed to be knitted together, and his expression began to look a little ugly. Come on, why does this smell so bad? Big guy, don't you brush your teeth every day? There was a bit of ridicule in Lin Yu's tone, and the king of all evils could certainly feel it, so at this time he was also furious, and let out an angry roar, and then waved his own. The fist hit Lin Yu directly and hard like this. In just a moment, the fist came in front of Lin Yu. Lin Yu felt the terrifying pressure on the fist, and his face began to look ugly. The space-time beast at this moment stood directly in front of Lin Yu. It was the first time that Lin Yu faced such a terrifying guy. This was also the first time that Lin Yu felt that this battle might be a bit suspenseful. Big man, are you confident that you can kill this hateful guy? The space-time beast heard Lin Yu, and after saying this, he just hesitated for a moment. This guy's strength is a bit scary. Judging from my current strength, if I want to kill him, I'm afraid. The time and space beast stopped talking halfway through, but the meaning seemed to be very obvious. At this time, when Lin Yu heard what the space-time beast said, his expression was the same, and he suddenly sank. No, we absolutely can't go on like this, find a way to kill this big guy. And at this moment, Baihu's voice suddenly sounded in Lin Yu's sea of consciousness, send me or the old dragon out to join forces with the space-time beast, and we will destroy him in minutes. After Lin Yu heard Baihu say this, his expression also looked like this. He condensed slightly, and then nodded lightly. Yes, that makes sense. If that's the case, let's release the old dragon. When the five-clawed king dragon heard what Lin said, he burst into tears and his excitement was beyond words. It's great, it's simply great. After such a long time, I can finally go out. The master finally thinks of me. The master finally thinks of me. After Lin Yu heard the five-clawed king dragon howling like this, 3 black lines appeared on his forehead, and he was speechless for a while. I said, if you dare to roar again, then I might as well release the white tiger. At this time, the five-clawed king dragon heard Lin Yu. After saying this, his expression was slightly condensed, and a strange color flashed in the corners of his eyes and brows. However, at this time, he really did not dare to yelled. Lin Yu's mind moved, and then the five-clawed king dragon transformation appeared directly in front of Lin Yu. At this time, the five-clawed king dragon suddenly entangled the evil king of 10,000 corpses with his sword. The evil king of 10,000 corpses felt that his movements were suddenly restrained by a huge force. At this time, he suddenly turned around and saw a smiling dragon head. The evil king of 10,000 corpses felt a chill run down his spine, and then he said weakly, "No, that's not possible. My orientation is normal." At this time, the five-clawed king dragon heard about the evil king of 10,000 corpses. After saying this, he was also furious at the time. In addition, he had not been out for such a long time, so he was inevitably a little cruel. The five-clawed king dragon traveled quietly like this, and the evil king of 10,000 corpses was crushed to pieces by the five-clawed king dragon in an instant. At this time, Lin Yu turned around, glanced at the space-time beast, and then nodded gently, "It's your turn now." The time and space beast's thoughts moved, and then the wine trough was directed at the space around the evil king of 10,000 corpses, suddenly compressing towards one place. After the five-clawed king dragon felt the power of this space, his face suddenly turned pale, and then he suddenly rushed outside. After the five-clawed king dragon left the previous space, a bang was heard, and the evil king of 10,000 corpses was instantly broken into bones and dregs. After the five-clawed king dragon saw this scene, he couldn't help but shake his head. I didn't expect that, brother, you would be so miserable, and you would end up like this in the end. Alas, how pitiful." Lin Yu heard the five-clawed king dragon. After saying this, he just shook his head, and then with a thought, the five-clawed king dragon and the space-time beast transformation instantly returned to his body. At this time, the five-clawed king dragon also let out a painful cry, "Master, I haven't breathed enough fresh air outside. Master, please let me out." 3 black lines appeared on Lin Yu's forehead, and he was speechless for a while. "Do you know how much spiritual power I have consumed by summoning you two at the same time? There is only a quarter of the spiritual power left in my body. If I spend more, I am afraid that I will encounter those people again soon. The scary guy doesn't even have the strength to protect himself." After hearing what Lin Yu said, the five-clawed king dragon lowered his head like a dog that had been taught a lesson. There was a sense of grievance in the corners of his eyes and brows. However, facing Lin Yu's tyranny, the five-clawed dragon dared not speak, and dared not say a word. After seeing the five-clawed dragon like this, Lin Yu reluctantly nodded, "That's good enough, stay inside honestly, at worst I will call you out next time." After hearing Lin Yu's words, the five-clawed dragon's face was full of joy. "Master, is what you said true?" "Of course it's true, why would I lie to you?" At this time, the five-clawed dragon was so excited that it flew directly into the sky above the sea of consciousness. As for the other beasts, seeing that the five-clawed dragon could go out to fight and relax their muscles, they were naturally envious. "Master, what about me?" The voice of He Lu sounded in Lin Yu's mind. At this time, after hearing the voice of He Lu, Lin Yu also raised a few bitter smiles at the corners of his mouth. "You are the same, I will summon you out when I have the chance next time."